The voicemail came in at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning while I was still in my car in the parking garage, finishing the last of my gas station coffee before heading into the office. My mother's voice, clipped, rehearsed, the way she talks when she's already decided something and is just informing you as a courtesy. "Sweetheart, your grandmother signed some paperwork last week. We've decided it's best if the house goes on the market before spring. It's a lot to maintain. We'll split everything 4 ways, obviously. Call me when you get a chance." I sat there for a long moment. The garage was quiet except for a car 2 levels up, someone's engine echoing down the concrete. 4 ways. That meant her, my uncle, my aunt, and me. I didn't call her back. I didn't text. I put my phone face down in my bag, walked into my office, and pulled up the county property records database before I even took off my coat. My grandmother's house was still in her name, for now. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a dramatic person. I don't post on Reddit about my family. I don't journal. I don't call my friends and cry about things. I am a paralegal at a real estate firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have spent the last 6 years watching people lose things they should have kept because they didn't understand how property law works. I know exactly how it works. And when my mother left that voicemail, I knew with absolute certainty what was happening, what had already been set in motion, and exactly what I needed to do before it was too late. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and this is the story of how I kept the one thing in my life that was actually mine. My grandmother, Nana Jo, raised me from the time I was 9 years old. My parents divorced, and my mother, to put it plainly, wasn't in a position to take care of me for a stretch of years that turned into most of my childhood. My father had his own problems. Nana Jo had a 3-bedroom house on 2 acres in Concord, about 20 minutes outside of Charlotte, and she had a vegetable garden and a porch swing and a rule about no shoes inside. And she made me do my homework at the kitchen table every single night until I graduated high school. I went to community college, then transferred, worked 2 jobs, got my paralegal certification. The whole time I came home on weekends. I mowed her lawn. I drove her to her cardiologist. I sat with her through 2 surgeries and a broken hip that took longer to heal than anyone expected. My mother and her siblings showed up at Thanksgiving mostly, sometimes Christmas. Nana Jo never said a bitter word about any of it. That was her way. But 3 years ago, when she was recovering from the 2nd surgery and we were sitting together in her living room watching the evening news, she turned to me and said, very quietly, "Claire, I want to make sure you're taken care of." I told her not to worry about it. She gave me a look that I didn't fully understand at the time. The kind of look that means I've already handled it. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't want to have that conversation with her. It felt like planning for something I wasn't ready for. A year and a half later, Nana Jo passed. Quietly in her sleep, the way she would have wanted. She was 83. I was with her. My mother flew in 2 days later. My uncle drove up from Colombia. My aunt, the youngest of the 3 siblings, came in from out of town with her husband and immediately started walking through the house with the particular kind of measuring look that I recognized from work, the look people get when they're calculating square footage. I don't have anything against my family, and I want to say that too because this story isn't really about hating them. I understand that people see grief through the lens of whatever they need. My mother needed stability. My uncle needed money. My aunt had always wanted the house and never gotten it, and I think in her mind she had simply been waiting a long time for her turn. None of them are villains in some clean narrative sense. They are just people who are decided somewhere between the funeral and the 48 hours after it that the house would be sold and the proceeds divided. What they had not done was ask me what I knew. I'll tell you what I knew. 3 years earlier, after her first surgery, Nana Jo had asked her personal attorney, a woman named Patricia who had handled her affairs for 20 years, to draw up a transfer on death deed for the property. A toll deed in North Carolina transfers real property directly to a named beneficiary upon the owner's death without going through probate. It doesn't require the family's agreement. It doesn't require a vote. The deed was signed, notarized, and recorded at the Cabarrus County Register of Deeds. The named beneficiary was me. I had known about this for 18 months. Nana Jo had told me herself, matter-of-factly, on a Sunday afternoon while we were planting tomatoes. She said, "I filed the paperwork on the house. It goes to you when I'm gone. Patricia has a copy, the county has a copy, and I'm putting one in the fireproof box in the hall closet." Then she handed me a trowel and told me to dig the next hole 6 inches deeper. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my uncle or my aunt. Nana Jo said it was her business and she'd handle her own affairs, and she had. I respected that. What I also did in the 18 months between that conversation and her passing was prepare. Because I knew my family, and I knew that the moment Nana Jo was gone there would be a window, a brief, disorienting window of grief and paperwork and assumptions, where someone might try to move the property before I could assert my claim. I had seen it happen to clients. I had watched families tear each other apart over real estate in that exact window. I was not going to be the paralegal who understood every warning sign and still got caught flat-footed. So here is what I had done quietly. In the background, over the prior year and a half, I had contacted Patricia and confirmed that the tow deed was properly recorded. I had obtained a certified copy from the county. I had drafted a letter, reviewed by one of the attorneys at my firm, asserting my ownership of the property upon Nana Jo's death and outlining the legal basis. I had researched what a wrongful sale or attempted encumbrance of the property would look like and what remedies existed. I had an attorney at my firm, someone I trusted, on standby, ready to send a formal notice within hours if needed, and I had updated the locks 6 weeks before Nana Jo passed, during a weekend visit when she asked me to fix the back door that had been sticking. I installed new deadbolts on both exterior doors. Nana Jo watched me do it from her kitchen chair and said, "Good, I never liked those old locks anyway." The voicemail from my mother was a Tuesday. That Saturday I drove out to Concord. The house felt different in that particular way that houses feel after someone is gone from them. The vegetable garden was still there, frostbitten and waiting for spring. The porch swing was still there. I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes and let myself feel it, and then I made a cup of tea from the tin of Earl Grey she always kept next to the stove, and I sat down and did what I always do when things get hard. I worked. I brought my files. I reviewed the TO deed again. I reread Patricia's notes. I made sure I had everything organized and accessible, because I had learned in my job that the difference between winning and losing a property dispute is almost never about who is morally right. It is about who has the documentation, who has it organized, and who has already filed what they needed to file before the other party made their move. I had already filed my claim with the county the morning after Nana Jo passed. My mother called twice while I was sitting at that kitchen table. I answered the second time. "Have you thought about what I said?" she asked. She has this way of framing things as if the conversation you haven't yet had has already happened and you simply haven't caught up. "I've thought about it," I said. "Good. I've already talked to a realtor, someone local, very experienced with estate sales. We're meeting there next Friday to walk the property." "You're walking the property," I said. "Yes, just to get a sense of the value. It's a preliminary thing. No decisions have been made." A pause. "Honey, I know this is emotional, but the house is going to need a lot of work. The roof is old. The HVAC is at least 15 years old. Realistically, none of us can afford to just let it sit. Selling is the practical choice." I didn't argue with her. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with my mother before she's ready to hear something is a waste of everyone's time. I told her I understood, and that we could talk more on Friday, and I said it in the calm, measured way that I have trained myself to use when I need someone not to realize that I am already 3 steps ahead of them. We hung up. I texted Patricia. I texted the attorney at my firm. I drove back to Charlotte. By Wednesday, a certified letter had been sent to my mother, my uncle, and my aunt from my firm's letterhead, documenting the existence and recording of the transfer on death deed, confirming that the property had passed to me by operation of law upon my grandmother's death, and advising them that any attempt to list, encumber, or enter the property without my authorization would be treated as a legal matter. My mother called me 6 times Wednesday evening. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the messages in order. The first three were confused, borderline polite. The fourth was angry. The fifth was the one where she said I had manipulated Nana Joe, that Nana Joe couldn't have understood what she was signing, that Patricia must have pressured her, that it was wrong, that it was shameful, that she was my mother and I was doing this to her. The sixth was quieter. She said she had spoken to a lawyer. Good, I thought. I'm glad she has a lawyer. It will make things cleaner. That Thursday night I couldn't sleep. I'm telling you that because I want to be honest. I lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling and thought about my mother when she was someone I ran to, before everything got complicated. I thought about my uncle teaching me to fish in a pond behind his old house when I was 7. I thought about my aunt's laugh, which is genuinely her best feature, loud and sudden and real. I thought about all the ways families break down over money and property and old wounds, and how nobody sets out to become the person who stands in a parking lot with a crowbar. But then I thought about Nana Joe sitting at her kitchen table watching me do homework, night after night, for 9 years. I thought about all the things she never complained about and all the things she quietly arranged so that I would be okay when she was gone, and I decided that the least I could do was honor what she had done by fighting for it. Friday came. I arrived at the house at 8:30 in the morning, 2 hours before my mother had said they'd be there. I walked through every room. I opened the fireproof box in the hall closet. Everything was there exactly as Nana Joe had said. I set up my laptop at the kitchen table. I made coffee. I waited. My mother arrived first at 10:15, pulling up in her Kia with my uncle in the passenger seat. My aunt came separately, her husband parking the truck behind them on the gravel drive. The realtor came last, a man in his late 40s in a khaki jacket with a clipboard and a yard sign rolled up under his arm. They walked up to the door. My mother tried the handle. It didn't open. She knocked. I opened the door. She looked surprised to see me. Then she looked at what was behind me. The kitchen table with my files open, my laptop, my coffee cup, and her expression shifted into something harder to read. "What are you doing here?" she said. "I live here," I said. "This is my house." She stepped inside, looking around like she was taking inventory. "We need to talk." "We can talk," I said. "But the realtor should probably wait outside." The realtor looked at my mother. My mother gave him a look that said to stay, and he came in anyway, standing just inside the door with his clipboard. My uncle started talking first. He said the deed was probably being contested, that Nana Joe hadn't been in her right mind the last few years, that the family deserved to have a say. He said it the way people say things when they're reading from a script a lawyer gave them over the phone. My aunt said she had driven 14 hours and she wasn't leaving without talking this through like adults. I let them finish. I am good at letting people finish. It is one of the skills you develop when you spend 6 years watching depositions and mediations and people making arguments they believe in regardless of whether the documents support them. When they were done, I opened my folder and laid the certified copy of the deed on the kitchen table. I laid the letter my firm had sent. I laid the county recording receipt showing the date and time the deed was filed 3 years ago, when my grandmother was recovered from surgery, sharp-minded and fully ambulatory. I laid Patricia's notarization certificate. "This isn't contested," I said. "It was recorded at the county 3 years ago. It took effect the moment she passed. There's no probate. There's no vote. The property transferred to me by operation of law. If you'd like to speak with your attorney about what that means practically, I'd encourage you to do that." My mother looked at the papers for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "She never told us," she said. Her voice had gone quiet. "She told me," I said. "It was her house and her decision. You knew for 3 years and you never said anything." "She asked me not to." There was a long silence in that kitchen. The realtor shifted near the door. My uncle was looking out the window at the vegetable garden. My aunt's husband had already stepped back out onto the porch. "This is not how family does things," my mother said finally. "Mom," I kept my voice even, "you called me to tell me the house was going on the market. You didn't ask me. You called a realtor before you called me. You were going to split the proceeds 4 ways, and you had already decided that before you knew what the actual legal situation was." I paused. Nana Jo made her decision a long time ago. She made it legally and properly and with her full faculties. I'm honoring it. My mother said nothing. My uncle turned from the window. He looked tired suddenly. He looked like a man who had driven 2 hours on a Friday morning and had realized somewhere on the highway that he wasn't going to win this one. "The realtor doesn't need to be here," he said. I looked at the realtor. He was already rolling up his yard sign. He left first. My aunt and her husband left next. My uncle spent a few minutes on the porch, and when he came back inside, he shook my hand in a way that felt like the end of something, and told me to take care of the place, and left. My mother was last. She stood in the kitchen for a while looking at the tin of Earl Grey by the stove, the same one that had been there as long as either of us could remember. She picked it up and held it for a moment, then put it back. "She loved you very much," she said. It didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like the first honest thing she'd said all morning. "I know," I said. "I loved her too." She left without hugging me. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the cars pull out of the gravel drive one by one until there was nobody left but me. I want to tell you what happened after, because I know that's the part people always want to know, and because they think it matters. My mother's attorney sent a letter 2 weeks later challenging the validity of the TO deed on the grounds that my grandmother had not had sufficient mental capacity at the time of signing. My firm responded with a letter from Patricia, who had known my grandmother for 20 years, and with medical records from her cardiologist confirming that at the time she signed the deed, she was cognitively intact and living independently. The challenge went nowhere. There was nothing to challenge. Nana Jo had known exactly what she was doing. My uncle never pursued it. He called me about 6 weeks later, on a Sunday, not about the house. He called to tell me that he'd found an old photo album in some boxes that my grandmother had left with him, and that there were pictures I might want. We talked for 40 minutes. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. My aunt still hasn't called. I don't know if she will. I hold that quietly and try not to make it mean more than it does. My mother and I talk. It is different now. The way things are always different after something is named out loud. Some of the pretense is gone, and I find honestly that I prefer it. She came to Concord in March and I showed her what I'd started doing with the vegetable garden. She stood at the edge of it for a while and said the tomatoes needed to be further from the fence. She was right. We spent an hour transplanting them. We didn't talk about the house or the deed or any of it. We just worked in the garden, which is the most normal we have been with each other in a very long time. I live at the house now. I made the commute to Charlotte work. I wake up in the mornings and I drink my coffee on the porch swing, and the neighborhood is quiet at that hour, and I can see the garden from where I sit. And I think about Nana Jo at her kitchen table watching me do my homework. And I think about the afternoon she handed me a trowel and told me she'd taken care of it. She had. The thing I want you to understand, if you've stayed with me this long, is that I didn't win because I was clever. I'm not telling you this story to congratulate myself. I won because my grandmother loved me enough to plan carefully and quietly over many years, and because she trusted me with what she'd done, and because I took that trust seriously. I didn't take it seriously because I was strategic. I took it seriously because it was the last thing she gave me, and I was not willing to let carelessness or inertia or someone else's assumptions take it away. There is nothing I own in this world that I value more than that porch swing, that vegetable garden, that kitchen table, not because they're worth anything on the market, but because they are the place where someone chose me consistently over a lifetime. And that is not something you list, that is something you keep. The Earl Grey is still next to the stove. I keep buying the same tin. It's a small thing, but every morning when I reach for it, I feel her there, and that is enough. I thought a lot about what made the difference in all of this. Not tactically. I know what made the tactical difference. The deed, the certified copies, the attorney on standby. I mean, what actually made the difference underneath all of that? And I keep coming back to this. Nana Jo paid attention. For years and years, quietly, without making a production of it, she paid attention to who showed up, not who called on holidays, not who said the right things at the right moments, who actually showed up, who drove her to appointments and sat in waiting rooms and mowed the lawn without being asked and came back the next weekend and the one after that. She watched and she remembered, and when it mattered, she acted on what she knew. That is a kind of intelligence that I don't think gets talked about enough. We talk a lot about being book smart or street smart, about credentials and strategy and knowing the right people, but there is something that sits underneath all of that, a quality of paying honest attention to the people around you and letting what you see actually mean something. Nana Jo had it. She didn't let loyalty become abstract. She made it concrete, legal, recorded at the county courthouse. She turned 30 years of watching into a document that protected me when she couldn't anymore. I think about that when I think about what I owe her. Not the house. The house is just a place. What I owe her is the same quality she modeled. To pay attention honestly, to act on what I see, and to do the hard preparation work before I need it rather than scrambling after the fact. That's the thing about being prepared. People misread it as coldness. When I told my mother about the deed, she said I had been calculating, that I had been waiting to spring something. What I had actually been doing was making sure that my grandmother's wishes were honored, that the thing she quietly arranged over years was not accidentally undone by people moving fast in a grief window. That isn't calculating. That is respect. There is a real difference between manipulating a situation and simply being ready for it. I made mistakes too, and I want to say that plainly. I could have found the gentler way to tell my mother what was coming. I could have called her before Friday, before she showed up with a realtor and a yard sign and a plan that was already in motion. I don't know if it would have changed anything, but I could have tried. Choosing to stay quiet until the moment of confrontation was the strategically clean choice, but it wasn't the warmest one, and I live with that. What I keep returning to is this: the choices we make over years, the small, consistent choices about who we show up for and how we treat the people who need us. Those choices don't disappear. They accumulate. They become a record. And eventually, one way or another, the record is read. Nana Jo's record said she chose me. My mother's record, and my uncle's, and my aunt's, said something else. Nobody forced that. They made those choices freely, across decades, and the outcome reflected them. That is not punishment. It is just consequence. The natural, quiet, completely impersonal consequence of the choices you make over a lifetime about who matters to you and what you do about it. The Earl Grey is still next to the stove. Every morning I reach for it, and I think about her, and I try to be worthy of someone who paid that much attention.